And we are. Hello children! I am missing you lots, so I decided I'm going to read you a story with one of my favourite characters from Mr. Men. This is all about somebody called Mr. Mischief. Now what does mischief mean? I think it means being a little bit naughty. Let's read what he gets up to. Poor Mr. Happy had a tiring day. Rushing here and there and back again, cheering people up was hard work. Whew, he sighed as he went into his house and sat down for a well-earned rest on a kitchen chair. But then, do you know what happened? It fell to bits. Oh, poor Mr. Happy. Bump, went poor Mr. Happy. That is all I need, he said. I rather think that I have had a visit from Mr. Mischief. He was right. Outside Mr. Happy's house and running away as fast as his little legs would carry him was a small, mischievous figure. Mr. Mischief! Oh, Mischief, glorious Mischief, he cried. I do so love it. And he ran, giggling, into the night. There he is with a big grin on his face. The next morning there was a knock at Mr. Greedy's front door, but when he went to answer it, there was nobody there. But what was there was a box, and inside the box was a large chocolate cake filled with cream and the most delicious looking pink icing. Mr. Greedy's eyes gleamed. He licked his lips and shut his eyes and opened his mouth and took a large bite. There he is with his box. I wonder what happens. Let's see. Ugh! The chocolate wasn't chocolate. It was mud. The cream wasn't cream. It was cotton wool. And that delicious looking pink icing wasn't icing at all. It was toothpaste. Ugh! And outside Mr. Greedy's house and running away as fast as his little legs would carry him was a small, mischievous figure, giggling as he ran. That is not all. That very same morning, Mr. Funny discovered that someone had filled his hat with treacle, very sticky treacle. Can you guess who that someone might have been? However, that very same afternoon, Mr. Mischief did something that he was to regret. He was walking along through the woods looking for Mischief when he came across a wizard. A fast asleep wizard. I know, giggled Mr. Mischief. I'll change the wizard's wand for an ordinary piece of wood, and then he can't do any magic. He grinned a mischievous grin and crept quietly towards the sleeping wizard. Mr. Mischief reached carefully out and seized the wizard's magic wand. But what he didn't know was that wizards' wands don't like being seized. Help! Shrieked the wand in a high shrill voice and awakened the wizard, who in turn seized Mr. Mischief by the nose, which was very painful. Oh, look, he's squeezing his nose. Let go of my nose, cried Mr. Mischief. I know who you are, said the wizard. You're that Mr. Mischief who soared through poor Mr. Happy's chair legs and, he continued, baked a rather unusual cake for poor Mr. Greedy and, he went on, put treacle in poor Mr. Funny's hat. I've been hearing all about you. Let go of my nose, cried Mr. Mischief again. Very well, said the wizard, but don't believe that you can get away with being as mischievous as that. And as he let go of Mr. Mischief's nose, he got hold of his magic wand and waved it. Beware, he said, and went off. There he is. He looks quite cross, doesn't he? Silly wizard, muttered Mr. Mischief. Can't you take a joke? And he went home. "Silly wizard," he said again, as he sat down in his kitchen. Bump! "Oh dear, silly, silly wizard," groaned Mr. Mischief, picking himself up, him and his silly magic, and he made himself some porridge for tea. Smiled Mr. Mischief as he put a large spoonful of porridge in his mouth. Ugh. Somehow, as if by magic, which of course it was, the porridge had turned into sawdust. "Oh dear," spluttered Mr. Mischief. "Perhaps I had better not get up to quite so much mischief in the future after all." And he went upstairs. He doesn't look very happy, does he? He jumped into bed, splosh and squidge. The bed was filled with raspberry jam. Ugh. Oh dear, sighed Mr. Mischief.